when we got to trial, at the end of the trial, which is a good story in and of itself, the FDA asked the court, and the court complied and banned my book. So I've lived for the last 22 years with a felony attached to my name, which prevents a lot of things. It caused a great amount of hardship.
Hey friends, Sean here. Before we begin this powerful critical update, I just want to say thank you to our sponsor, the Patriot Solar Bank. Look guys, with all the earthquakes in California and natural disasters around the world, it's real easy to understand why having your own power bank for your cell phone and other items is really important. You'll never have to waste money on batteries again because it's solar powered, and with a dual USB port, you can charge up to 2 devices at once, and you can charge your phone obviously anywhere with this bad boy. It's lightweight and very durable, compact, and great for all emergencies. The device features include solar powered recharging, dual USB ports, 8,000 mAh battery capacity, LED lamp illumination, USB cable, and detachable compass. The Patriot Solar Bank is a perfect gift, but there's a limited supply, so get yours today at a discount before they sell out. Use promo code SGT15 to save 15% off your order. Take advantage of it now and give your family the gift of power anywhere in the world. Just visit patriotsolarbank.com. I'll leave the link below this video. Hey friends, Sean from SGT Report here. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's great to have you back. I say it every time because it's true. Without you guys, there would be no reason to have these conversations. And these conversations are important because they're not the type of conversations you're going to find in the mainstream media at all, anywhere. In fact, these conversations are now deemed so dangerous by YouTube that they're all labeled misinformation and they're all immediately demonetized and deemed not suitable for most advertisers. So we're going to continue to have these conversations because you're not going to find them anywhere else. My guest today is Charles Pixley. He's written a book called Do No Harm. And guys, this is a conversation about cancer, its causes, and its potential quote unquote. Now, I'm not endorsing this book or anything Charles is about to say, but it is your free will to listen and to share this with anyone you think might benefit from it. Before we begin and before we welcome Charles, I just want to say I got this email from my friend Buzz, who says over the past 2 months, he's driven through North Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota. He goes on to name about 12 other states, and he says he hasn't seen one chemtrail in the sky. He says he also has noticed that the sky seems bluer and that the clouds look like actual clouds. Guys, I've been saying the same thing. Here are some photos that I took yesterday in my neck of the woods, and today as I look out the windows again, beautiful blue skies, and when they're clouds, they're normal, puffy, white clouds. So a hat tip to Serial Brain 2, who said that on or around the 4th of July, Independence Day this year, President Trump took the skies back. Let us know what you're seeing in your neck of the woods. I'm not saying the chemtrail program has stopped entirely, folks, but I'm seeing vast improvements where I live, and evidently Buzz is too. All right, now on to the main show. Charles Pixley joins us. Charles, how are you?
I'm feeling wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing well. What are you seeing in your neck of the woods? You still seeing geoengineering, chemtrails, or blue skies?
I'm at the shore of Lake Ontario in New York, and we were getting them incessantly like everybody else. And now I see cumulus clouds versus the fake cirrus, but I still see an occasional broadcast of those chemicals from the jets, but not like it was. It was incessant before. And if Serial Brain is accurate, that they're putting out an antidote, whatever that means, then maybe that's what it is. But it's a whole lot less, I'll say that much.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about the antidote. I'm not so sure about Serial Brain 2 and the decodes or any of it. But look, the job of a journalist or a reporter is to report on what you're seeing, and that's all I'm doing here. And guys, I'm telling you, 100% improvement in my area since around July 4th. So I hope you all are seeing some improvements in your area as well. Charles, tell us a little bit about your history for those that don't know. You stumbled upon what you believe to be a quote-unquote for cancer. That alone is going to get us banned off of YouTube. And then the powers that be came after you with their guns blazing and wanted to put you in prison on 19 counts and 19 years in prison. You did end up doing some time, so they got their wish to some extent, but ultimately they just wanted to shut you up. Why?
Well, for one, let me just start with a disclaimer. Anything we say today is not an attempt to sell medicine. It's strictly for informational purposes under the First Amendment and also under Title 21, Part 56 of the Uniform Code of the United States Code, not the Code of Military Justice. And we're not here to disparage any medical institution. What happened was in 1990, I came across an author named Christopher Bird who wrote a book called was called The Gallery of the Microscope at that time. It was later changed to The Persecution and Trial of Gaston Nason, who was the scientist who did tremendous work and created a microscope that I would say that equals Royal Rife's microscope in many ways. And he can see in the blood, or he developed a technique with dark field microscopy to see in the blood a living entity called the somatide, which is an indestructible life force. It's the last stage of light before it becomes matter in our form. And he tried numerous ways to destroy it through radiation, through freezing, through numerous methods of destruction, and it was indestructible. By observing this somatide, it is what he also discovered or confirmed what is called pleomorphism. Just like a butterfly goes from a caterpillar it goes through a chrysalis and comes out a butterfly. We have the somatide is pleomorphic in our forms, and it has a standard 3-stage cycle in a healthy body, but it goes into a 16-stage cycle, which is observable and trackable when you start to go into a disease state. You can also at that stage pre-diagnose cancer up to 2 years before it actually manifests. And that by itself is scary to the industry. Second of all, he created a medicine called 714X, which is a compound of camphor. It's very, very low level. It would be considered a homeopathic dilution, if you want to call it that. But it's so light that you could inject a radiator full of it in your body and nothing would happen. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but the point is it's totally harmless. And the whole real scary part is that this injection or this medicine targets a signal that's sent out by all cancer cells, and it's well known. You can even ask your own doctor. It's a known entity called HCG, or human chorionic gonadotropin, and all cancer cells secrete that hormone, and that blocks the immune system. So with the 714X, which carries a molecule of nitrogen, the nitrogen shuts off the signal that blocks the immune system, and the body's immune system recognizes the neoplasm or the cancer cells and destroys it harmlessly. And then your body passes it out through normal excretion process. So,
Charles, let me jump in, because when we get into the quote unquote science of this stuff, it tends to get a little scholastic. So I don't want people to, check out just yet. Let's do this though. Let's first address the fact that you're not a doctor, but you've studied this stuff. Well, you've dedicated most of your life to studying this stuff.
30 years.
All right. So what is it about the system? When I say the system, I'm talking about Western medicine. What is it about Rockefeller medicine, Western medicine, that negates or tries to prevent people from having discussions like these? Why are they so afraid of people having conversations about alternative treatments? And let me just add, thank God, back on May 30th, 2018, our president said this, quote, "People who are terminally ill should not have to go from country to country to seek a cure. I want to give them a chance right here at home." And then he signed an executive order legislating and fulfilling the promise he made to expand healthcare options for terminal Americans. It's the right to try bill. And, if you're terminally ill, if they say you have cancer, Charles, and you get your chemotherapy and you do everything they tell you to do, and they say, sorry, you're a dead duck, we can't cure you, go home and die. President Trump is even saying, no, you've got the right to try things that are not FDA approved. What do you have to lose? They've already told you you're terminal. So it's common sense that President Trump signed that executive order, that piece of legislation, the right to try bill. It was the famous piece of video I've played before when the little boy standing next to him tries to give him a hug. very heartwarming scene. It speaks to who this president is to a large degree. A president for the people, perhaps, not just a president for the corporations and big pharma and vaccine makers and vaccine pushers. All right, back to my question. Why is the system so tyrannical that it tries to prevent people like us from having conversations like these?
Well, it's not only just the conversations, it's the actual scientific breakthroughs. This is the history of medicine, history of science in general is always fraught with opposition. The prevailing school, what they used to call the irregular school, and in our case, the homeopathic school, or anybody who came up with an idea that wasn't prevailing. The most extreme example I will give you is from the 1800s. A Dr. Schemmelweis suggested that you should wash your hands before you help a woman give birth, because in those days they would come right from the morgue with their hands all over deceased forms and then go right into the birthing room, and the people and the mothers and the babies would die. And when he proposed that you should wash your hands, they destroyed him. So go further or go forward into 1920s when Rockefeller took over the industry, and he sent Abe Flexner, and he got together with Carnegie, and they then formed the AMA. And then they, I don't know if invaded is the right word, but they started inculcating themselves into the educational process, extending codifying what it takes to become a doctor, and basically doing everything in their power to push out the homeopathic school, which is totally non-toxic, and totally focusing on the allopathic school, which is big in pharmaceuticals, which plays into the chemical industry, which is born of the petroleum industry, which Rockefeller was strong in. So from that point, anything that came out that opposed their brand of science, they destroyed it. They just shut it down. Royal Rife is one of the first. If you go forward to 1940s, the Nuremberg trial, Dr. Andrew Ivy, one of the most respected physicians in the United States, was at the Nuremberg trials. He discovered in Germany at that time a cure for cancer called cribiazin. He brought it back to the United States, and they destroyed the man. There he was, one of the top from Johns Hopkins, and incredible. So then you've got the Hoxsey remedy, which is still active today. You can find Hoxsey, and you have to go to Mexico for it, which is one of the things that President Trump was alluding to. And there's numerous other B17. Maybe people remember amygdalin, B17, or what they call that, Laetrile.
G. Edward Griffin has talked about B17. I think he's written a book about it, correct?
That is correct. He wrote just a book on that alone. He also touched on Hoxsey. He not just touched on him, he's a prolific writer. He goes into great depth. But if you go to G. Edward Griffin and find him either on Amazon or wherever, you can purchase each and every one of those breakdowns of those medicines. So I don't know if I answered your question as to why, but what everybody knows now, I mean, when I started doing this in 1990, 91, 92, 93, there was no internet. And as big as your show is now, and beautiful and wonderful audience, the brilliant audience that you've garnered, we were that big then. We had I did a 5-minute interview on KABC in Los Angeles at the drive time at 7 in the morning in Los Angeles when everybody's on the freeway. And just a 5-minute interview with a shock jock, and I got 3,000 phone calls. I mean, the amount of cancer out there it's astounding. It's like putting your teacup into Niagara Falls. It's just, oh my God, it comes at you. So many people have been touched by it. The statistical now is 1 out of 2 will have cancer in their lifetime. So if you, just from the time that they shut me down, is 22 years, and approximately 2 million people die every single year just in the United States from cancer. What they blame on cancer, but typically it's from the chemo and radiation, at a cost of anywhere from $160,000 to millions of dollars in some people's bills, where they put you into receivership and to collection, and so if you just take it at the lowest number in the last 22 years, That's approximately $20 trillion. And how many million people? Maybe 40 million people that have died.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, no, it's an epidemic, and it's an epidemic they don't want to cure because it is the ultimate moneymaker for
what a
Western
cash
medicine.
cow. I
Yeah.
mean, I say things that are a little more, maybe, if you forgive me, if you look at everybody knows now that who was responsible for the death camps. I mean, that's Bayer, which now is Bayer Monsanto,
Right.
and IG Farben, and they created the mustard gas, and they created the xylitol B, and so forth. They're still very active, and at the FDA you have a revolving door. All these big companies pay major fees to the FDA. I don't know why they would pay the FDA, but they do. When legislation is written, the laws are written by the pharmaceutical companies and handed to the lobbied Congress, and they pass the law that the lawyers from the pharmaceutical companies hand them. And you can't really blame Congress all that much, other than the fact that you can blame them, but the point is that they don't. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, you think your congressman's going to understand it? So nobody spends the amount of time that the average person does spend a lot of time to study in advance. How do I eliminate this if it ever happens to me, and how can I get out of it without the big expense, and how can I get out of it with my life?
Right.
So this is the purpose of my, if you want to call it a campaign, but I've devoted almost 30 years to it. And when I saw it happen, being a veteran, having taken the oath, I took it very seriously. And I saw an enemy, a domestic enemy, and it's everywhere. It's not just here. They own and operate, control the Congress of virtually every major country.
I know. It's the New World Order, right? And it's what we're fighting against. It's essentially the tyranny that the people of Hong Kong are trying to protest and fight against as well. And it's a worldwide awakening. Guys, the name of G. Edward Griffin's book that we mentioned there, for those who just want more information, it's called World Without Cancer, The Story of Vitamin B17. There's also documentaries on YouTube. Just Google that. You'll get to watch the documentaries or go buy the book. And speaking of books, Charles Pixley's book is called Do No Harm. I'll link it below. You can use discount code SGT to get $5 off. Now, the book, Charles, describe the book and describe why they targeted you originally over this book, and why are you getting back into this? Aren't they just going to come after you again?
Well, this book was written to comply with the law, which is Title 21, Part 56, informed consent. By federal law, you are entitled to, and they are required to provide you with all the positive and all the negative information. So in order to present 714X to the American public, I wanted to give them everything they could possibly use, whether they want to give it to their doctor, give it to their attorney, give it to a legislator, give it to anyone. So it's written for the layperson, it's written for the scientist, it's written for anybody, and it includes legal information as well as a form for to give your consent. In those days, we would have them send in their consent form, and then we would help them obtain the medicine. And of course, we were accused of just wanting to make money. When you consider how much we were making against what the industry is making, we were like an ant. But the point is that this information is clear. And doctors, lawyers, everybody told us this is the best information source to inform us about the use of a medicine and the effect of a medicine we've ever seen in our life. So when we got to trial, at the end of the trial, which is a story in and of itself, the FDA, I won't say they forced the court, but they asked the court, and the court complied and banned my book, which by itself is a violation. So now that 22 years has gone by and President Trump has basically reauthorized what we already had. We already had the right to life. We already had other laws that were in place back as far as 1914 to give us the right to avoid chemotherapy. So that reaffirms it, I guess. But most people don't even know those laws. But anyway, we have the right to try. And so because that came out, and I'd already been tried for making available this knowledge and this medicine for the American public. I'm retired now, and the truth is still the truth. And I haven't stopped talking about it for 30 years. I just haven't broadcasted it. And it's still a touchy subject. Most people right now, anybody that's listening here has got they know somebody or has had a family member who's been affected by cancer or they even have cancer. And it's a very difficult topic to try to help anybody. I mean, that's one of the hardest things we ever had to do is, I'll tell this story. They read the book. They take it to their doctor. The doctor looking and says, "Are you crazy? You're going to die." And give them back the book like, this is quackery, quackery is how they label anything that doesn't comply with their standard chemo and radiation, just as anything you come up with that opposes the New World Order, you're a conspiracy. It's a conspiracy. So these are buzzwords. And if you look me up in the Google or, go across wherever you look on the internet, you'll see the story and you'll see the so-called quackbusters out there who discredit and so forth. So I've lived for the last 22 years with a felony attached to my name, which prevents a lot of things. It caused a great amount of hardship, lost everything. But what I went through is nothing compared to the millions of people, millions and millions, more than Second World War, just since I was in business, have died at the hands of chemo and radiation. If you extrapolate it worldwide, it's unfathomable. So what do we do? If you don't know, you can't fight.
Yeah, well, it's a precarious situation in which we find ourselves now, because just for instance, when I interviewed my friend Carrie Rivera about potential treatments, not cures, but potential treatments to help kids with autism, 2 days later, Amazon banned her book. And then NBC News did a hit piece about her. Look at the list of homeopathic doctors that have died in very mysterious ways. Charles, do you want to talk about that? Do you have any theories about that? Because to me, it reminds me a little bit of the Clinton body count. I'm not sure how so many homeopathic doctors can go mysteriously drown themselves when they're in healthy marriages with successful practices.
Exactly. I mean, they've gotten very brave, as everybody's noticed over the last, 10 years, maybe 15 years. Now they're blatant about what they're planning to do. They tell you right up front, just like your show yesterday with Harley, where he discussed this, where it's a hearkening back to the style of what happened in Nazi Germany. They starting very young. I can remember black and white television, where at the end of the day there was a target that with a dial tone, and even then they were advertising National Cancer Institute to raise money. So over 60 years, how much money do you think has been raised in the search of a cure? I don't call 714X a cure. I just, what is the right word? If you say cure, it's illegal. But if you race for a cure, do a 5K for a cure, search for a cure, donate for a cure, that's okay. But if you say you've got a cure, oh my God, so it's a remedy. It's an option. And what's the worst that can happen? If you use this and it works, God bless you. If you've already gone through chemo and radiation and it brings you back from death, God bless you. If you start with this and still you have a problem, you can always go to the chemo and radiation. You can always find a way to hammer yourself or poison yourself or burn yourself. I mean, none of it makes sense.
Well, there's a medical mafia at this point that has been turned loose in this country, and it's really disgusting. One of the prime examples of that is SB 277, the legislation signed into law in California requiring mandatory vaccines for children. Can't go to school. Kids can't go to school. They can't homeschool. It's absolutely disgusting. We're told trust the system to the degree that you're to trust your children to take injections from big pharma companies that have amnesty against lawsuits if those vaccines harm your child. So among the list of books that I wanted to talk to you about today, just briefly, and really in a macro sense, is not only G. Edward Griffin's book about B17, but Eustace Mullins, his book, Murder by Injection. And you sent me this, Ralph Moss, PhD, formerly a VP at Sloan Kettering. He wrote several books, The Cancer Industry, one called Doctored Results, another called Questioning Chemotherapy, and one called Antioxidants Against Cancer. What do you suppose that VP, that former VP of Sloan Kettering, knew and was trying to tell the world about this
story.
medical mafia?
Ralph's a good story. He was there when I was there. He was there. We were at the same time. We were going to the same meetings. We're different personalities and different. I'm more flamboyant and more of a fighter. He's just quietly does his authorship. But he worked for Sloan Kettering, and one of the revelations was that he went into the office of one of their, I don't know which executive, it was one of the top doctors, and they had a private, close the door. And he said, "Ralph, I'm going to tell you something. You see this on my shelf here? All these are cancer. This is for cancer. These are chemotherapies. And every time we get bored or we run out, we need a new one. We pull off one from up there, and we make this the star of the day." I'm paraphrasing, but it's insidious. I mean, when he was ready to go to the publisher, his car, he was carrying the galleys in his car, and over on Riverside Drive, the car broke down, and they stole everything out of his car, and they took all the galleys away from him. So Ralph really had an inside track, and the cancer industry really tells very clearly and in a very erudite way what's going on. Ralph still does. He helps people to discern what's a good idea for your particular kind of cancer. He quote unquote endorsed me back in the day. There was a lot of doctors we had 4,000 doctors on our network. We even were treating people at the Sultan of Brunei, and not that that's a great endorsement, but we had the top echelon of the elite and the normal human, normal guys like us. So, ask me another question.
Well, let me do this. Let me just say, in defense of current research and Western medicine, I should say this. I should give them some credit. The survival rates among children with acute lymphoblastic leukemia have increased drastically from 1990 to 2005. Something like 85 or 90% of these kids are now surviving. So there is research being done. They are helping cure kids. So this is not an indictment entirely of Western medicine or current cancer treatments at all, is it, Charles? I just wanted to say that in fairness.
No, I mean, I have great respect for the physicians. They've spent they spend, 10 years just to become a doctor, not to mention all the time to build their practice and the enormous amount of pressure, the lawsuits against them, the expense of being a physician. And now, how do you take a guy who's spent his whole life studying this one path and convert him? It's a very complicated process, and I don't believe any of them go into business to hurt anybody. I honestly don't. So this is their indoctrination. This is their training, and it's good to hear that there are successes like that. Nick Gonzalez was curing lymphoblastic leukemia and pancreatic cancer with enzyme therapy, and he disappeared. I don't know quite what happened to him.
And what's the name? Is this book Conquering Cancer?
I believe that's correct. I can't see it on my shelf from here, but I can go get it. But yeah, that's one of. He's got 2 or 3, but he was one of the best. Right there with Andy Wakefield. Thank God, Andy Wakefield's still alive. He's escaped the sudden death of some of these guys, but they took his license away just for opposing with knowledge. I mean, you keep touching on the vaccination. I try to steer away from it because it's such a hotbed of. That's like, cancer is passé. Everybody knows that they're in it for the money. They don't quite know what to do, but they know that they're exposed. Where vaccination, right now, they're pushing very hard to get it. Just in New York, just yesterday, my own grandchildren, they're telling them that next year they're expecting they're going to have HPV injections, Gardasil, by the time they go into 6th grade. And also they're going to give the nurses authority to give the injections without parental consent, just by the consent of the student. And if the student doesn't want it, they will call the parents and tell them that they disobeyed.
Let me just say something about that. HPV, Gardasil. There was a couple who lived 3 doors away from us. We still live in the same neighborhood. They moved to the East Coast. He was a doctor. orthopedic surgeon. His wife was an anesthesiologist. Very nice people. I used to play poker with him all the time and buddies, and he'd have people over. And they had a daughter, still do, she's alive, but their daughter was a competitive figure skater. Now, at the time, she was only 9, 10, 11 years old as she was growing up in the neighborhood when they still lived here. I had talked to him briefly about vaccines, just very briefly. I mean, look, these doctors are so indoctrinated that they're not going to listen to me or anybody else. But we had conversations. He was an open-minded guy enough to have conversations about what I felt to be the dangers of vaccines when I was waking up. Anyway, jump to, their daughter starts having severe health problems after the second HPV vaccine. Severe health, like autoimmune problems, couldn't eat normally, started to have inflammation, swelling. It hurt too much to ice skate. I mean, really, really tough stuff. They woke up. They did not get her the third round of shots. And to this day, they blame the HPV vaccine for her problems. And because she was perfectly healthy, again, a competitive figure skater. So what you're saying about these mandatory vaccines, if they're going to try to make the HPV vaccine mandatory, and by the way, Charles, they want to make it mandatory for boys too, which is just monster science. Absolutely monster science.
From my perspective, from my study, what this is population control, because they're sterilizing the girls, but they went a little too far. They're killing them or they're becoming disabled. And either way, it's a sterilization of a type. New York State just, a month ago, maybe not even a month ago, all the opposers, my daughter being one, and then the Amish and the Hasidic Jews and various other, maybe 30,000 people showed up in Albany with Robert Kennedy Jr. to oppose the lifting of they wanted to take away your right to oppose vaccinations because of religious belief, which they accomplished. The judge gave, well, it was very nice. It was so nice that you all came to Albany and you made a very compelling story. But no, you do not have the right to say no to the vaccination. So they've nullified your rights. They've nullified any constitutional rights you've had, any Bill of Rights you had, any law. In fact, one of the things that I was a small part of, I met with Governor Cuomo, the father, Mario, and on his table was a law, hadn't been passed, but had gone through legislation to allow any doctor in New York State to practice any form of medicine without any reprisal, as long as there's no harm to the patient. So here comes Andrew. Andrew? Yeah, it's Andrew, right? Here comes his son, who completely shines over that law. So now if a doctor says, wait a minute, your father says I can practice any form of medicine, and you're telling me I can't practice any form of medicine. Excuse me? So it's a very, very tenuous time. I want your call, what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. You're one of the most phenomenal experts in journalism.
Oh, I mean, stop!
There come no better. There come no better.
No, that's very kind. But we're all doing our part.
We're doing our part, and this part is the wake-up call. If everybody just remember chain letters, how big popular chain letters were, and how some people get really, really rich. But the whole point is that it worked. You tell your neighbor, he tells somebody, they tell some, and they tell two, and they tell four, and they geometric. We have the power in our hands to take it all back. Mr. Trump is out there showing, hey, I'm out here alone taking all the heat. Where are you? And of course, he's got millions and millions of people who are right there with him, but are they right there with him? We have the power ourselves to take back. This should have happened long before Mr. Trump, by our own efforts. So I'm one, you're one. There's a lot of wonderful new alt news channels. As Q says, we are the news now. So it's time to act, because as Mr. Trump said, if we don't, it's just going to dissolve. I mean, it's getting worse by the minute.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on today. I like to have conversations like these because they are challenging to the establishment and frankly challenging to guys like you because they're probably going to come after you in your book now again. But we'll link the book below. It's called Do No Harm. There's a longer title than that. But tell people how they can get the book, Charles. And the discount code is SGT for $5 off, correct?
That's correct. Yes, sir. It's www.714xbook.com. And then you'll see enter discount code, and then you hit apply that code, and you get the discount. This is not for me to make money. This is for you to become educated. You need this. You need to know. And we had 2 blood tests. We can pre-diagnose cancer 2 years in advance. We have one that's done by having a blood draw. The other is live. The Masons, you had to be there live. But ours was created by my chief investigator, Dr. Schildbecker. And by the way, one of my co-investigators was Dr. Robert Atkins, the diet doctor. So this was not some flaky medicine that was out there. This is the real deal. And I'll show you one other way that this is the real deal. During the middle of the trial, we were winning. We were actually winning. We had one patient who went up there. Her name was Lillian Dufour. Lillian had been radiated inside her mouth for squamous cell cancer in her throat. And during the radiation, Lillian said, "It smells like my flesh is burning." And then the radiation attendant said, "Yes, Lillian, and you took it so well." And her daughter literally brought her back to life with an eyedropper. That's literal, to hydrate her. She went on the 714X, and it was just like, bam. I mean, a few months she was doing square dancing with her husband. She was in the trial. So here we're winning through the first day. Everything was well. In fact, I had met with the Assistant Secretary of Health, Dr. Philip R. Lee. You can look him up. He's a great guy. He's no longer alive, but he gave me a waiver to bypass all the rules and regulations about this. And on this, so the first day ends, and the judge is called to Washington, and he had a private meeting with Chief Justice Bill Rehnquist and William Jefferson Clinton. Mm-hmm. He came back the next day, and he walked in the room, and he had the upside down smile. And I said to my attorney, I said, "We're done. It's over." And indeed, it was. And
you went to prison for a year, was it?
I went to prison for the better part of a year, 3 years probation, and they do everything. They prosecute you before you even get there. They wipe out your any way. If you have money, they take the money. They took my car at 6 a.m. I mean, why taking my car? So again, it's whatever I did. I was kind of at the time I was the warrior. I was like, "Come on, let's go. I want to, take you on. I want to bring you down." Now I'm just all right. I'm a little more demure about it, but nonetheless, it has to be done. It has to be told. And as it says in the Talmud, and it says also in the Quran, by the way, if you save one life, you have saved the whole world. So,
well, my hat's off to the president for signing that Right to Try Act, because again, it's just common sense, especially for those who are terminal. If you're terminally ill, then why not try experimental treatments that are not FDA approved? Why not? President Trump agrees. And I guess that's the best thing that we have is our freedom and our right to try and our right to be informed and our right to do our own research and to find out truth where we can find truth. Our guest has been Charles Pixley. Charles, I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, John. It's been a great pleasure and a great honor.
Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. Guys, the discount code is SGT. The link to the book is below. Thank you so much for listening. We very much appreciate it. And again, for real news 24/7, visit us at sgtreport.com, the antidote to corporate propaganda and Mockingbird mainstream media lies. God bless. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
First of all, the scientific argument is a fraud. Carbon dioxide is not a poison. It's not destroying the planet. They have no intention of replacing the energy that we currently get from nuclear, coal, and fossil fuels. What Lyndon LaRouche said is the only way they're going to be able to carry this policy out is with fascist austerity measures, similar to what was done in Nazi Germany.